Welcome back, everyone, to another new episode of Grow Your Path to Wellness. I was out of the office the last recording. I was doing a little mini trip with my husband and the doggo. Took him to the beach for the first time because I'm obsessed with my dog. So while I was away, Amanda hosted Gina Goodson on the topic of the power of touch and kind of talked more in depth about the benefits of massage and how it's way more than just a stereo, type of self-care, and the actual science and nitty-gritty of why massage is beneficial for our wellness. This week, we're excited to welcome back Lisa Schaefer. She, if you remember her, if you're new here, Lisa, she came and joined us and did a whole series on all of the chakras and how trauma impacts those and ways that we can heal those. So she comes back with us, and we're excited to have her back. And today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about what embodied therapy is. Thank you for coming back, as always, Lisa, and we're happy to have you back.
Yay! So Lisa, yeah, I feel like you were here for one episode even before we did the chakra series too.
I think
you did like an intro. Yeah, to the chakras. Yeah, and then we were like, we need a whole series. And then Lisa is just a breadth of information and education and expertise. So we just love having you back when you're able.
And here is where I love how alignment comes in, because this is a really great next episode after your massage episode. Because, oh my goodness, I just love all things that are embodied, and massage is definitely embodied. And so we're going to talk about embodied therapy. And so we are going to unpack what that looks like. I am going to talk a little bit about the chakras as well, because I just can't help myself when it comes to the body and how we release energy, and really looking at emotions and trauma specifically, but it doesn't always have to be trauma. So I do want to let people know that we carry all of our stuff with us everywhere we go. And what embodied therapy is, in a very general sense, is how we go into our body.
I'm so sorry to interrupt this beautiful spiel you have, because it is gorgeous. Can you just do a quick recap of who you are and why you're talking about, right? I know what you did, why you're talking about it, but your background and who you are for people that maybe didn't get a chance to listen to the previous episodes.
Yeah. I am a licensed social worker, clinical social worker. So I do mental health at a private practice. I'm also a registered yoga instructor and a Reiki master. And I have combined all of those wonderful fields of expertise to offer holistic services for clients. Is that helpful? Yeah. I'm sorry. I just wanted to just jump right in. I don't care who I am. So here I am. Here we're showing up. So we're going within our bodies to explore our emotions. And there's a lot of mindfulness stuff out there. And I think because it really is a very simple practice, people think the simplicity means that it doesn't work. And there isn't a good buy-in necessarily to say, how do I tap in to receive positive, nurturing care for myself, because I am my own medicine, right? As opposed to going outside of ourselves. Maybe that's, doing some dysfunctional behaviors like substances. Maybe it's looking for a pill to magically, heal us or help us. But really what embodied therapy teaches clients is to learn to listen to our bodies, learn to listen to that conversation between our mind and our body connections. And that is done through movement. I specifically use yoga, which is why, I added that to my repertoire of things. It wouldn't be, a service without saying, the body keeps the score. Bessel van der Kolk talks about when they were working with Vietnam veterans. So think about how long ago that was, that these vets who were coming back and having a really hard time transitioning back into society, they use yoga. They use yoga as a part of their therapy. And Bessel really says, like, if you're not using yoga as a part of your treatment, then you're going to not get the full benefits.
I was going to say too, how you were touching on the things, because I always go back to like my own kind of caseload and the populations that I work with in my practice. And I see a ton of either I see like kind of, it's not only on this binary, but like either internalizers who just kind of start to then go and live inwards, but not in a way where they're listening to, like connecting and listening to their body and what signals are there. But more so like just completely disconnecting from themselves. So maybe they're not going to substances or dysfunctional relationships or things like that, but more so they're just so disconnected. I think we always use that saying, they feel like a head on a stick. It's like, I don't feel, and I'm like, we can get to that place. But getting reconnected to, see, because I feel like there's the other end of that spectrum of people where it's like, but I don't do those things. I don't go externally, but I'm like, but we still can be very disconnected from ourselves and not listening, but we're just living in our head all the time.
I love that you said binary, because that's actually like one of the key phrases that I have here in my notes for today, is that we get stuck in the binary. So again, I just love how everything aligns, because that is true. Like, there is so much gray area, and also body work is so different for everybody, and breath work is so different for everybody, and what comes up and how we implement these practices is how we can have safety, how we can look at faulty habits. And one of the things about 12-step meetings is that our secrets keep us sick, except we know as trauma clinicians, our secrets have kept us safe, right? And so it's going from that switch of, okay, this no longer serves me. It did its job. I'm now an adult, and I'm not living with maybe an abusive parent or even an abusive partner if, somebody was in a domestic situation. And so these are practices that we can use in everyday life, no matter what the circumstances are.
You know what is always so wild to me is like how often I have to explain, because my spiel, right? Like, nobody learned, like, this is a natural part of the human existence, regardless of what your life looked like. The need to bridge the connection between our emotions and our physical body processes is like a necessary biological need to survive, right? It's like survival needed. And yet the amount of times I have to explain to people, you're not reaching a accomplishment and achievement and connection and all of these things because you don't have your foundation of your house. Like, you're trying to run a marathon and you have no legs. Like, you have to start here. And people don't realize that often the disconnect is the reason that they know something's wrong, and they know they're having these symptoms, right? They know whether it's maladaptive behaviors or internal anxiety and self-shame and all those things. They can't figure out that the true problem is the disconnect. And trying to explain that to someone, they're like, nah, that seems a little too, I don't know, woo-woo, or that doesn't seem right. Like, that can't possibly be the answer.
I feel like it has less logic to it. Sorry, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
We try to logic our way, I think, through emotion. I'm just as bad. Like, none of us are immune to that just because, like, we do this for a living. But I feel like if I can't make it make logical sense, because I haven't been taught that, it does make logical sense too. But if you've never heard it before and you're at a state of like intense distress or discomfort, it's like, you want me to do what? Like, that doesn't make sense. I need all of these things, and it needs to fall into my logical toolbox. And if I've never heard those things before, they push it away real quick.
And I think, it's interesting. We're in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? So think about all of the stigma that still surrounds mental health, and people who might think, well, I'm not that bad, I don't need to go to counseling, and I don't know who out there in this world who hasn't been impacted by this pandemic. They must have been living in a cave under a rock or something, because again, this is a huge historical moment where we all have been impacted. And, you know, pre-pandemic, most people didn't work on the computer all day long. But, you know, there's a famous, you know, tech neck, right? So like, what does that mean? Like, you hold all your stress in your neck. What does that look like? Is it because you're staring at the screen all day? You know, yes, there's some things about posture and how you're sitting, but what does it mean to hold this energy? Because again, embodied Reiki, we talked a little bit about Reiki in the chakra series as well. But like, we're holding this energy up here. And so, you know, how are we breathing into the fascia? You know, are we getting up, doing stretches I think the recommendation is every hour, do like 5 to 10 minutes, right? I mean, most places, because again, productivity standards and things like that, that our companies, for the most part of people, don't even have the opportunity to do that. And so while it might not be, you know, a trauma where somebody's physically abusing you, or emotionally abusing you, but that is abuse to the body, where you can't even get up and walk around to, you know, wiggle some of that energy out. That is trauma.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Yeah. It's like, and I don't want to call it I don't know, I kind of got away from like the big D little t, because I think it puts a binary in comparison on those. But yeah, it's like those, like, I think about it, and we lived through 9/11, right? And that was a very visceral, on the screen situation that happened, and people would identify that as traumatic. But something like the pandemic, where it is every single day there is a new level of grief, whether that's actual death, losing a job, losing expectation of being able to have a wedding, right? Like all the things that happen at the end, people sick, seeing people in masks, not being able to leave your house for however long, right? Like all of those things do add up.
And if I feel sick, oh, is this it? Do I have COVID? Who have I, you know, exposed this to? When do I take a test? You know, and it's not just like, oh, yep, my nose is runny and my head is stuffed up because it's sinuses. I mean, this has changed everything. And so again, kind of looking at these day-to-day things, and I know I am not the only person on this call who buzzes around from the next thing to the next thing. So much so, Amanda will laugh at this, that last week I had a very rather not embodied experience where I locked myself out of the office, because in preparation of leaving, I grabbed my car keys, which have all of my office keys. And then when I did the things that I needed to do to leave the office, I got to my car and no longer had my keys. Why? Because I was thrown out of my routine. Things didn't go the way that I wanted them to, or at least the way that I had expected them to. And so in my frustration, I inevitably laid down my keys and walked out of the building. I was not grounded in that moment.
Your little brain wasn't online, right? Like all these things we talk about, you were in your stress brain. You weren't able to logically think clearly. And yet someone will internalize that as, I'm such a mess. I always forget everything. I'm such an idiot, right? And it's like, no, there's a literal biological science thing happening here that is necessary for survival. It's just a little, I was saying to my husband the other day, I was like, yours is just like kind of pedal to the floor more often than it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
And you forget the neurodivergence, or like actual, brain development and things. Like it's all biological processes. And then you add in, if we have some, dysfunctioning happening, it can be a perfect storm of just attacking our self-esteem and self-worth and all of those things that to be embodied, we can connect to those aspects of ourselves. So just completely, we're up here, 1,000%.
And when we're not grounded, what kind of decisions do we make? Most likely, they're going to be impulsive. So we're not going to function well in that moment. We're looking at immediate gratification and not long-term rewards, because we just want to satisfy the immediate need. And we're not allowing ourselves the rest in order to be grounded.
I see this even, my brain took this like, I don't know, maybe to a different place than where we were going, but I see this even down to when I start working on like the basics with clients of like, what are we putting in our body, or how am I treating my physical body? And going through those day to day, I don't say that foods are good and bad, but however, we're not grounded and we're so disconnected and we're buzzing on to the next thing. So I'm grabbing things that are quick, but actually aren't making me feel well. Like
they're not nourishing to your body. It's like you can put kerosene in your car, but it's not going to go well.
Well, and everything has energy. Everything has energy. So the energy from the apple that is closest to the earth that I'm nourishing my body versus the energy from the Nabisco Cheez-Its that have been, processed and packaged and have been sitting on a grocery store, right?
They're literally in our cabinet right now. And I just snacked on them yesterday, so very rude of you. But truly, like the dye, I mean, this could be a whole episode in itself, but like the additives, the dyes, and the connection between those things that are in our food and behavior and functioning and all sorts of, yes.
The profit that companies make off of us we say that in healthcare all the time, right? But also these other companies, they know this. They can market things that thrive off of us not being connected, us not being grounded. And I didn't want to derail this, but like that's where my brain took it. I was like, shoot, like.
And then shame us when we showed up to the doctor's office with any sort of health condition because of the sad American diet or unrealistic, toxic standards of productivity and achievement.
Well, and in that, and of course, it wouldn't be a podcast episode without a reference to TikTok, right? Because there's that too. You can't, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. When you go to the doctor, if you don't know your body, how do you describe what is going on? And so then people, and I know we see videos of people on TikTok who say, I know my body, I know that this isn't right, and are advocating for themselves, and sometimes having to go to 2 and 3 different doctors. And then, there are the people who have the not so good, medical stories on TikTok. That's because they know what's going on a cellular level with them. And people externally don't believe that you know what's going on with your own body.
Because they're so disconnected from theirs. Yeah. But they don't realize that that's an option.
And I think our medical system, I don't think it takes as much, it doesn't take into account the stuff that we're talking about today, that things having energy and, the things we're having our environment, things that are, that we're putting in our body, all of those things. I desperately wish that our medical system, there's some very niche providers, but then we can go into a whole spectrum of like insurance coverage and blah, 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 blah. So, but I don't think that this topic is considered in and that's our foundational part, our physical wellness is a foundational part of ourself. And these things aren't considered.
You say if I say emotions are stored in our body, or like helping clients, like if I describe what I do in a group of people and they're like medical doctors, they look at me, they're like, oh, and just move right along. Like, I'm not taught that. That's not my education. Okay, I'm done. I'm off. I told you I was on one before we started recording.
No, it's okay. It's okay. This is great stuff. So again, going back like to the tech neck, right? So that is our throat chakra. It's the area where we have speech and expression. So neck pain, if we're having pain in our neck, we're going to have restriction. So what does that look like? Can we not look up or down? Can we not look side to side? And that's where that binary part that you were talking about, Kelsi, comes in, because we feel like we're stuck in looking in direction. And so again, kind of thinking back to how the power of choice, our clients come in and oftentimes feel stuck and they don't feel like they have the choice, right? So that is energetically. And so what are the challenges, that come with that? I know there's a person that I have that is presents as stuck, and many, many, many options are offered. And while it may be fear that they don't try those things, or it could be some of the negative narratives that, we still have to work on. They very much have this binary view. It's either yes or no, black or white. And they don't have a sense of voice.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I can or I can't too. Like, their ability to motivate to do anything is stuck in a binary too. Yeah. It's so wild how all of it is connected, right? Because you started talking about like when you could, or where you can look, right? In your perception and your view. And then I think about EMDR and then the episodes we've done on brain spotting and the research I've done on brain spotting and looking in a certain place. And if that is no longer in your view because it's uncomfortable to turn that way, what is not being processed in your brain, right? Like it's just all coming in full circle for me. So how do you, I know you have your bullets and maybe we'll get there, but how do you then, like, how do you do you educate your clients as you do now, like as you are with us? Like, how do people learn this, like that it's necessary and then move into it?
Yeah, so it is about really kind of coming into the stage of change of action. And so again, a lot of our clients come in, they might even put something on the intake paper that is very superficial. I have a newer person who I'm going to be seeing next week who they've had EKGs, they've had all kinds of blood tests, they lose their breath, they have chest pains, but they're pretty convinced that it's not anxiety. So to me, that would be somebody who's coming in on a contemplation stage of change. So they recognize the physical part, but they don't believe that it could be attached to emotional things, because this is what he said to me: this is the best time of my life right now. How could this be anxiety, right? And so then when we look again at that binary, well, there's not anxiety in good things, that's not excitement, or, we don't have fear of the next chapter of our lives, when we do get married, have children, or, get the job of our dreams or the house of our dreams. There's lots of things that come in emotionally with that.
Or is it atypical and therefore uncomfortable to be doing so well? Yeah. Are we so used to chaos, to stress, whatever that looks like, that the calm
I have a
is
third
anxiety producing?
I was like, I think Amanda's is different. And then mine, where my brain went, was our present events activating something from past pieces of life. Like things are great right now, and it's like our brain and things that get kind of filtered through get very distorted too.
Me having a child, it's a beautiful thing for me and my husband. Holy trauma. Holy like, hey, trying to parent, right? When you still have some reparenting to continue to work on is like, whoa, but wait a minute, like this should be again, is it a societal thing too? Like the happiest time of my life, but like, whoa. Yeah. And no one prepared you for this. No one educated you. No one described. And then so you feel like again, internalized guilt, shame, frustration with yourself. What's wrong with me? Everyone else looks okay, right? And I know I'm getting on another tangent, but like everyone masks and presents to the world as if everything is phenomenal, and that's what we compare ourselves to.
Well, and I think that's a really great thing, because I'm sure you guys probably see when clients come in and they can only identify sadness as an emotion, or only identify anger as an emotion, where there's a whole spectrum. And I know I've talked about this in one of the other episodes, but I really try to get my clients to identify their emotional range on a 10-point scale. I love scaling. It's motivational interviewing. It's also a great way for a client to quantify and qualify how they're feeling and what's going on. So what's a 1 compared to a 10 when you're not feeling happy? 10 for me is, my face is definitely going to be flushed. If I'm angry, I'm probably going to be saying some swear words. I'm definitely going to be, internally, I feel that little buzz coming on because of the adrenaline and probably cortisol and all the other wonderful hormones that go on when we're at a heightened state. But when I'm at a 1 at the grocery store because the person in front of me is taking too long, like I can work through that very, very easily, right? But not everything is a 10. And at Kelsi, you were talking about people who go inside, and not everything is a 1 either, right?
I was just going to say the grocery line too, though, like even that, it's not as simple as that, because the grocery line could easily become a 6 or a 7 or an 8 if there's something else that we're disconnected from and not realizing is building up and impacting us, like our overworkness, being overworked in our jobs, not appreciated, like marital issues, right? Like medical issues, right? All of that could very much bubble up, and that person in front of you at the checkout line could, and so that's important to know, I think, too, is what are the activators? You know, people on social media often will say trigger, but like what is activating that in you?
Mm-hmm.
What is inciting that in you? Because it was for a reason, right? Your body's trying to protect you. And I think that's something that is so important that people need to realize to be embodied is like, you know, I'll hear people say, I don't want the anxiety. Like, I hate the anxiety. And it's like, we have to come alongside it and be like, thanks for being here. Cause like, if my house caught on fire, I need you to tell me to run away, and collect my children and animals. Right. But like right now, like I said before, we don't have to have the pedal all the way to the floor. Like, we're okay.
Yeah. And even like with like posture, think about rounding in your shoulders. So again, I'm going to use computer because, you know, we're at the computer, we're rounded in. We are actually restricting our heart chakra in that moment. You know, that's why like shoulder movements and having our shoulders, not only does it help with breath work, right? But having our shoulders back and relaxed really does just increase our sense of well-being. It increases our confidence, right? Somebody who's confident isn't sitting with their shoulders rolled forward and their head kind of forward, right? Confidence is very erect in your chest, right? So like, why are we doing that? Is there conflict? Is there chaos? Is it because of, you know, sitting at a computer all day? You know, what are the reasons that we're rounding into ourselves, like Kelsi had talked about, as opposed to being open to that exchange?
I have to share something funny because it keeps coming up in my head, and like in a helpful, one of those funny, helpful things. Because I'm bad. I have that. I do this a lot of the tech, and like not allowing myself, or even setting reminders, all the things that I recommend my clients to do, like I don't do during the day, and I'm working on it. But my massage therapist, they shared something online, and it said that to help with posture and like openness and things, you need to stand like you're shooting lasers out of your nipples. So you're welcome. So now I catch myself doing things, and I'm like, Kelsi, you can't. You have lasers. Like you got to stand. Like, listen, pay attention. So.
It's like Austin Powers.
Yeah.
I like my Meredith Grey power pose. That's mine from Grey's Anatomy. And then I'm thinking, Lisa, like good things, right? Good things can cause or correlate with this. You're talking and you're like, for whatever reason, you're closed off. Being a mother or a parent, being a parent, a new parent with an infant, you're constantly looking down at them and closed off and hunched in, which is a great thing and necessary, especially if you're breastfeeding or whatever, just even holding them to feed them. Yet my heart chakra is closed off. So now my brain is like, postpartum, disconnection with your child, suicidal and homicidal ideations that come with all those things, right? And like the heart chakra is closed off. What does that have to do with that?
Yeah. And again, going into breath work, and I can't say enough about breath work because one, it's free. It's with you wherever you go. You can do it in any situation to help ground you. And one of the things I will say, a client had said to me, I was doing the thing that you taught me, but it wasn't helping. And I said, but you were still in a situation where the bear was coming at you. So instead of focusing on the bear, you were trying to ground yourself, which it might not have felt like it was working, but it was, because you were less focused on the bear.
And one of the biggest things I educate to my clients on in these situations, and I kind of felt it come up earlier. We were talking about how you're teaching your clients about it. I teach mine a lot about like distress tolerance and the window of tolerance. And putting these skills in place, I say it's not going to be like working miracles. Like, it doesn't mean you're never going to feel anxious or activated ever again. But I'm able to have more control over my focus and my overall energy in those moments and be less activated. And then when you point those moments out for them, like, but yeah, you were able to maybe finish that trip in the grocery store, or you didn't have a full-blown panic attack. You were able to walk away, go to your car, and then you were able to come back. Did it take the discomfort away? No, but we're building that ability to tolerate and ride out that discomfort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like I have to say this again because, you know, with The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel, who is a very well-renowned trauma researcher, is talking about using yoga as a therapeutic practice. They teach the Navy SEALs breath work. They teach them breath work. This is not a fantasy. This is not a one-off. This is an actual legitimate thing that they're teaching high-trained soldiers how to regulate themselves in high-stress situations by breathing.
Yes, and I'm seeing this, maybe it's only on TikTok. Maybe it's really on my side of TikTok, I don't know, but I see a lot of people doing the ice baths, which are great things to do, don't get me wrong, but that's what you're doing. You're doing these things, but other people, because it's on this extreme level, I feel like they're like, I'm going to try to do this, but if you frame it where it's not in an extreme way, where it's like, here, practice these things in your day-to-day life, I feel like people are less attracted to it because it's not as like sensationalized. But at its core, these are the things that people are doing. And in the Navy, or if you do these ice bath challenges, like foundationally, that's what's happening.
It is so like foreign to folks because I'm gonna get on my conspiracy theory about why we're continued to be disempowered about our ability to heal our own bodies. But when you say like, hey, you have everything you need within you to an extent, like medicine exists for a reason, right? But typically you have everything you need within you to regulate and create homeostasis. That is just like, no way, I have to have an expert. I have to go like, and yes, you do need to do those things when it comes to it, but like at our core, we have the ability to self-regulate and heal our bodies.
And not only that, to add is the productivity or the go, 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 right? The buzzing of the bee. I have to be productive in order to have worth. So we are taking out mindfulness. You know, mindfulness is a form of self-care when it should be a standard of practice of our daily life, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to, go put my feet in the grass and, allow myself 5 minutes of self-care, when why not do that every day? Why aren't we doing that every day and getting ourselves out of this fight or flight process that is a very toxic part of our culture, because we're not aware of our emotions. We're not aware of our thoughts. We're not aware of even our experiences. How can we
things like a checklist item? Like, you're not doing it mindfully. I'll tell my clients, like, you can do anything mindfully. I said, but you have to be very intentional about it. It's not something that you're going to say, okay, on my to-do list, I'm going to go outside and put my feet in the grass for 5 minutes. Then you're focusing on if it's been 5 minutes, so then I'm on to the next thing. And it's like, you need to get to the place where you're starting to do things, and we get away from it, like, because we're human in the world that we live in. But bringing it back, it's not even about romanticizing our life. If you can get to that point, that's great. But just being present in the day-to-day pieces of life, like being very intentional about it instead of just buzzing around and being like, okay, I did it. I'm like,
well, that goes back to your client, Lisa, that said everything is great right now. But like, is it, or are you just buzzing about it all and not actually stopping to smell the roses? Which totally I, as a clinical social worker therapist, don't stop to be like, oh, good job. Look at all that great stuff you did and how that feels to be in your body, embodied with that feeling, and the congratulations of that. I'm like, what's the next thing on the list? Oh my gosh, I have to get that done.
And yeah, and so then embodied therapy is all about the here and now. It's about that mindfulness. It's about, well, as I'm sitting here and maybe in a meditative state and I'm breathing and I'm noticing my shoulder hurts. Well, why is that? What are some of the first thoughts that come up? And what does it feel like? And can I breathe into that and release some of that energy and tension? And then what comes up? You know, there's a lot to be said about where that energy is stored. Our hips are our emotional carriers of the body. You know, my joke is, you know, Shakira wasn't wrong when she said the hips don't lie. So like we are energetically keeping our emotions, you know, in our hips. I don't know if you've ever woke up with like lower back pain or hip pain. Why is that? You know, where is the blockage in your creativity or even your sexuality? And when we work with people who are in the LGBTQ plus community and they're trying to find their way, you know, these are some things embodied that they may experience. How we relate our emotions, how we relate emotions to other people, all is our energetic field.
Oh, Lisa, this is so good. Okay, I'm looking at the time and I want to be mindful of it because I don't want to lose our audience because it's such good info. So yes, continue on what embodied therapy is and then what like the goals of it are, like and how it might benefit someone coming up to you for that.
So I want to share this folktale to demonstrate like what embodied therapy is and how we can kind of go with this idea of change. And so this is a story from the Seneca. They're indigenous people of what is now New York. I believe it was a witch, or it was definitely a woman who threw a whole bunch of men into this ice house, hoping that they would die. And the men kind of got together and they decided that they were not going to sit on the chairs of the ice house, right? Because that was definitely going to end in their demise, diminish. So instead, they decided to dance and sing, and the heat that was generated from their bodies actually melted the ice house, and they were able to ideally live another day, right? And so this whole story, and I know I'm giving it a very glossed over example, is all about that binary. You know, what are the ideas behind being able to dance and melt away our ice house, being embodied that melts away the emotional struggle or the emotional stuck, you know, that we have, where we become trapped, where we become frozen, where we are inflexible when flexibility, I mean, like the only thing that's constant is change, right? So we need to be flexible in those moments. And so kind of looking at our rigid routines, how that impacts us, how change impacts culturally, systemic changes that are required, you know, on the macro and micro levels. And how when we dance, we know what comes next easier. It's more fluid. We're in a flow state.
I love this little folk tale. I'm sorry that we had to gloss over it because it sounds wonderful, but I had like the whole story in my head put together. I watched these men in this ice house dancing and sweating. Oh, that is like a perfect example.
So embodied therapy adds the yoga, adds the talk part and the yoga part, so that we can develop this mind-body awareness, so that we can have the experience in the moment. We're here and now. Our shoulder hurts. We're going to breathe into it. We're going to maybe do some journaling, maybe do some processing, and looking at what are the disruptions, where are the energies disrupting our lives. You know, is it because I am having problems at work or with my relationships? Socially, am I not able to engage? Again, pre-pandemic, It wasn't exactly easy to make friends as an adult. Post-pandemic, it's even harder. Do we do things that are compulsive behaviors to include addiction, shopping, you name
Sex,
it.
relationships.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Adopting cats.
In those times, is it because we're feeling powerless? We're feeling powerless and lacking self-efficacy, autonomy. There's lots of reasons that kind of go into that. And so compulsivity, we have a lack of control. And so, that goes back to that, we're not grounded. If I'm making impulsive choices, I am not grounded, which can create more and more problems. It compounds the issues that we might be having. So
I think it also is like the biological, like we shared before. Sorry, Kels. Like the logical front brain and your back survival brain. Like it is not only like beneficial to do embodied therapy. It is like not even if you like even without the therapy. Like yes, do the therapy to learn the skills, but outside of that, it is a necessary like daily functioning life skill you need, because if you're not grounded, if you're not relaxed, if you're not at a calm state, you cannot think clearly to make appropriate decisions, right? Like to decide what the next best thing is for you. And then another thing that I wanted to touch on, Lisa, is that like the importance of like I don't actually have to go in my yoga pants and use a mat and do yoga, quote unquote yoga in this therapy. Yoga is I think a lot of people think that that's what yoga is, but it is. And I'm not a yoga teacher, so please don't let me, but it's more the breath work and moving those things through your body rather than the actual movements, which are great, but you don't have to do a full on hot yoga and then talk about your trauma at the same time. Like that's not what this is.
Right. Yeah. No. And it's more intimate, and it's more on that gentle restorative, right? Because we want to breathe into the fascia. We want to release the tension, the fluid, the energy. And so, yeah, it is not your hot power, sweating to the 90s kind of type of class, chair yoga, which is a very gentle way. Again, I talked about, shoulder rolls. You do some shoulder rolls for about 5 sets of a couple breaths, 3 to 5 breaths, here or there. And imagine how lighter you feel up here, how open your heart chakra can be, how open your throat chakra can be. And then you can have this lasers pointing out so that, you have more confidence.
You know what's so wild, Lisa? You just described what physical therapists often work on with people, right? And that is like, oh, sure, yeah, I'll do those exercises. My chiropractor recommends that kind of stuff, right? But if you're like, hey, this is connected to your stress and your emotions, people are like, you're wild. That's not a thing.
Yeah. Well, and change for emotional well-being comes from the bottom up. It comes from how we look at the body and our particular behaviors, and whether we should continue doing those things because they're functional or not functional.
I think embodied therapy, like my brain kind of narrowed. So like the statement in my head is, I feel like embodied therapy gives you a space to look at signals and dysfunction like objectively. Because I feel like when we look at those things, we're not doing it objectively. So then we aren't being grounded in it. So it's like these things that are happening, that pain, or can it have a very medicalized explanation? Yes. But even if we don't look at it objectively, we won't know that. We won't be able to figure out where these things, this dysfunction in my whatever area of life, until I can get that space to actually do that. I think that's so important.
And because I'm a trained clinician, when I do go to the hot power class and I'm literally sobbing the entire time, I know what's happening. I know what that transaction is going on because of the energies of the room, because of maybe the things that my teacher is saying, because of what I'm releasing on my mat. And it's not to say that can only come to, an embodied therapy session to have that release. You can. How are you processing it once you're done? Are you journaling? Are you taking that to your therapist? If you have a therapist and say, man, I went to yoga class and ooh, dog, when we got into pigeon, I just could not keep it together. And I don't even know what that was all about. Downward facing dog, which is a resting position for many advanced practitioners. Like, man, it's nothing like crying and sobbing and having snot and tears run up and down your face. It is very releasing and very healing.
And does your therapist that you're bringing this to, if you do bring it to them, know what you're talking about? Or are they like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, right? That's a really good point.
Yeah, that I think I shared with you guys both. Maybe I know at least, I don't know. When I went to acupuncture recently, I had a flashback of trauma, and I was just like, cool, but like, does anyone prepare you for that? Do people like in the Gina and I talked about like kind of like informed consent, like how are you explaining these things to people, right? Like when someone comes into embodied therapy, are you describing what, that you might have snot coming out, like not in that scary way, but like letting people know that like this is going to be an emotional expression that is necessary for your body. Oh, Lisa, I think we're going to have you back again on Reiki specifically now, because that is another tool that people can use to be embodied and energetically balanced and healed. It is always a joy to have you. Are there any closing words or anything else we didn't get to that you wanted to share before we leave? I know we could literally talk about this for hours.
We could talk about this for hours. I would just want to say is that there is a sacred place for the wholeness in who we are. And therapy, embodied therapy, Reiki, energy work is all a part of that process.
So beautiful. Thank you. So yes, make sure you go back and listen to Lisa's previous episode on the chakra healing, or series episodes in the series on chakra healing. If you're watching on YouTube, I will link that here, so you should be able to pop up, and then and we'll maybe put it in the show notes for the podcast so people don't have to just scroll backwards. Next week, we are bringing in someone that Kelsi actually was on her podcast. Her name is Marissa Baker, and she's going to be talking about creating sunshine even when there seems to be none, which just like makes me so happy, and I so look forward to that. I'm all about that. So thank you for listening, everyone. Make sure you subscribe or turn your notifications on so you know when we're going to release our next episode. We are at a 2-week recording period right now, so we're releasing 2 episodes a month on Sundays. So we will be back in a couple weeks. Thanks, everyone.
And take care.
Bye.